Welcome to our live event. We are going to be working on a really fun, kind of evergreen kind of pattern today. So this might be your next go-to pattern for a baby quilt, a lap quilt, maybe for a gift for someone who's bought a new home, or maybe changing homes, and you want to do a housewarming kind of gift. So my name is Colleen Tauke. I'm your instructor for this event today. Let us know where you're watching from. We always enjoy finding out where our quilters live. We usually get people from coast to coast and from north to south, so even across the pond. So we love to see those quilters' names pop up. So let us know where you're watching from today. The pattern for Split Stars, our project that I have laying here in front of me, is the link for that is in the comment section. So click on that if you haven't already downloaded the pattern. Otherwise, you can come back and download later. All of our live events do live under the video tab or the more tab on our Facebook page. So you can always go back and rewatch, find the link in the comment section there. And you can usually find them more than one way on our website. So Split Stars is our project. We have Virginia who's watching from Cape Cod. Ooh, a very wet Cape Cod. Send some rain our way. We are so dry here in the middle of the country. Enjoy the rain you've got. Tina says hello from Atlantic City, New Jersey. Wonderful. We've got Esther watching from the Netherlands. Yay! Thanks for joining us. We've got Trish from the UK, Marilyn from Wisconsin. So we are getting quilters from all over to join us. This is fabulous. Split Stars. The pattern, like I said, is the link is in the comment section. You may have to put your email address in, but then you can get to the pattern. And as I printed mine today, the ink ran low, so my front page looks a little striped, but we have the quilt here in front of us. So let's look at what it consists of. We are going to be using this. I wrote this to be fat quarter friendly. You'll have a little bit of fabric left over from your fat quarter, not much. If you decide to do scrappy binding, you can almost. There's enough of a backup in case you make an oops, but you can pretty much use up everything, which having leftovers, you just have to store them. So we are going to be making blocks that look like this, and they are made from 2 fabrics so that we have triangle squares across the diagonal of the block. Then we have just solid colors on opposite pieces. So we don't have to position, so we don't have to do anything there other than cut an accurate square. And then we have to make these pieces that look, that create the points to our star. And they kind of look like a house shape. So you have 2 little squares that we're going to put on there, make kind of a diagonal seam, quick little block or unit. And we're going to make those in 2 colorways. If you look, these are just in reverse. So it's kind of an easy process, so kind of a lot of repetition. But we're only going to be making 16 blocks. It's going to be 4 across by 4 down. You can always make it bigger by adding more fat quarters to the mix. But in this case, it's going to be 48.5 by 48.5 when you're finished, which makes that really nice lap size quilt. It also makes really great for a baby quilt. So Barbara says hello from hot, hot, hot Houston. Oh, you guys are in a heat dome down there. I'm sorry. Eventually you'll get some relief. It always happens. And MJ says, good morning, everyone tuning in from outside Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So there's our Canadian links. Wonderful. When it comes to the supplies, this quilt, 16 fat quarters is all you're going to need to make 16 blocks. If you choose to do something else for binding, a coordinate, maybe a solid, it would take about half a yard to do the binding. But if you'd like to use up the scraps from your fat quarters, you won't need binding. So that's why I listed it as optional. And it takes about 3 yards to do backing to get it centered, especially if you're sending it to a long armor. And then it's pretty much your very common quilting supplies, the rotary cutter, cutting mat, the rulers, a straight edge for doing a stitching line on our small squares. So pretty much just the basic supplies needed there. Then if we're going to get into the cutting, so the cutting will give you exactly how many pieces off each fat quarter you're going to be doing. But the nice part is that on page 2, it gives you a diagram of how to orient them so that you get an alignment. And I realized this morning that the outline of my fat quarter did not get translated to the pattern. So I'm going to draw what the border would look like, what you have left. So you're going to have the space down here left that you can cut pieces for your binding out of. So we're orienting, this is the 18 across, this is the 22 down. And if you start adding up numbers, you'll know that you'll realize that there's no way you can stack 20 inches of 2.5-inch squares on the 18, so that you know this is the longer direction of the fat quarter. So once we get the fat quarters all laid out, now when it goes to cutting these, if you're new to cutting, new to quilting, or even if you're a seasoned quilter, sometimes it's easier to cut one layer at a time, one fat quarter at a time. If you are very confident in your cutting and you know that you won't be maybe interrupted in your cutting, you can cut multiple layers. So I cut 2 of these. This is my leftovers. I'm just going to lay out the pieces so that you realize that yes, you can cut 8 squares up the side of, now I did square off and straighten my outer edge along 2 sides, along a long side and a short side, so that I could easily get these then cut out. Because we always want to work making sure we have a straight edge. Now I'm getting a little past what my camera can stretch there, but know that there are 8 2.5-inch squares stacked there. Then when it comes to the 4.5s, we have 6 of those, so a half dozen fit in here. So we've got those kind of grouped together. And then it tells you to cut 3 5-inch squares. Now I've already cut my 5-inch squares in half, but you have to use your imagination a little bit. There's 1, 2, 3, just like in the diagram. And that leaves this little piece down here so that you can come in and cut 2.5-inch strips for binding. And it probably will only take 1 off of each fabric to get that. So you can come down into the bottom portion here and cut your pieces for binding if you like to do that scrappy, just because this is a very eclectic mix of fabrics. And sometimes scrappy binding just goes right along with there's a lot going on anyway, so why not use a scrappy binding? Okay, so from each of those fat quarters, you're going to cut those 8 2.5-inch squares. So I'm going to stack all those up. And in order to stay organized for this one, you're going to also stack up your 4.5s. And then you're going to take your 5-inch squares and you're going to cut each of them diagonally in half so that you yield 6 triangles. Now, I am not a person that normally will piece triangles. And if you've seen any of my patterns and followed me along, you know that I like to do 2 at a time method. But in this case, I don't want to waste any pieces because I did want to use my leftover fabric for binding. So I just cut the pieces in half, and we're still going to get really nice patchwork. So hang on. I know piecing triangles is really old school, but it's actually good for us to practice that skill also. We do a lot of fast cheater methods, and sometimes really going back to the basics of actually piecing together triangles is a good thing for us. So I've got all of the pieces from this one color, and I'm going to keep them all together, okay? If you want to use a baggy system, or if you would like to pin through that, or maybe a wonder clip would be the best. Some kind of a wonder clip to hold your pieces together. If you're going to be working on it in short order, and you have a place where you can lay everything out and you don't have a little furry friend who might knock them off on the floor, go for it. But the baggy system may help you if you have a four-legged feline who helps you in your studio. I know a lot of people have pets, and sometimes those pieces can get moved around. Okay, we've got people watching from Florida. We've got Punta Gorda. I have never been there. I'm going to look that on the map to figure out where that's at. And Grand Rapids, Michigan. Wonderful. Okay, so again, keep your like pieces together. And I've cut some more. I've got other pieces here because I'm thinking this is going to grow up to be a batik quilt, because this is what I said earlier as kind of an evergreen pattern. I could see this done in modern, really fun modern prints. I can see it done in batiks. It could be 1930s prints. It could be Civil War reproduction fabrics. It could be all in solids if you'd like. It could be Halloween fabric. I just happen to have had a set of fat quarters that was all in a Christmas print. And as you look at this, you're saying, yep, there's her stripes, there's her plaids, because I love to put those stripes and plaids in there to get just a little wonky so that you get some motion going on in your quilt. And of course, I had to pick a blue that has kind of a diamond effect to it, even though it's a batik. So keep your like colors together, no matter what genre of fabric you have selected. Keep like colored pieces together. And then we're going to get started on our piecing. So as you move over to page 4 of your instructions, it will tell you, and I was trying to be as concise as possible and still make sure it was clear. This is what you need to do. So I'm going to set these aside. You're going to pick out 2 fabrics that you want to use for your block. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to pick these 2 this time around. I want to use these 2, but from each of the stacks, it says collect the following pieces from each of the 2 prints. So I need 4 2.5-inch squares. 1, 2, 3, 4 from each. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I need 3 4.5-inch squares. So I'm going down to my squares. So I need 1, 2, 3 of those. And again, from the other color where I'm marrying these up, I need 3 of those. And then it says I need 3 triangles from each color. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3 on this one. Now, the rest of these are going to stay together because they may get married up with another fabric. You don't have to just to make 2 blocks that are identical, because now I have my first block and I have enough for a second, but I might want to match these up with a different set of fabrics later on. So I'm going to leave them in their baggie, leave those alone, and from these, we're going to construct a block. So it's time for triangles. The first thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to join triangles together, and I'm going to get everybody their mate, and we're actually going to put triangles together with a 1/4-inch seam. And if you know me, when it comes to, like I said, I don't piece triangles very often. Oops, I got to make sure my iron is hot for pressing later. You do maybe know that I am a person who oversizes pieces just a little, and then we will trim it, because when it comes to joining triangles and pressing, I know that things can get a little distorted, just a tiny bit. So I have upsized this just enough so we can trim the perfect center out of the half square triangle unit we're going to have, what this is going to yield. So hold on to the piece all the way down to the tip. Don't let it swing underneath there, so that you keep your 1/4-inch seam consistent. And batik fabrics are so nice and stable. I don't have to really worry too much about that bias cut. But if you have a looser weave fabric, those fat quarters, before you're cutting, here's a tip. If you think you're going to get a distortion on that edge, or if they're going to be stored for a while before you get to the sewing, Maybe think ahead and use some best press or some spray starch or spray sizing on your fat quarter before you cut it out your pieces. That will help stabilize those fibers just long enough so that you don't get too much stretch on that diagonal cut, because that is the stretchiest portion of your square. When it's cut on the true bias like that, you can get quite a bit of distortion. So also know that when you're putting this through the machine, try not to tug on the fabrics. The machine knows how to feed itself. So all you're doing is guiding. You're not trying to pull or oversteer. The machine will feed it through nice and neat. Hold on to it all the way to the end. And then you will have triangle squares that will be 2-color, made from triangles. So maybe that's something you haven't done. Okay, we're going to take this over to the iron and we're going to press that seam before, nice and flat, before we open it up. So what I'm going to just lay them out, hit that with a hot iron. Somebody asked in a video recently, why did you press them flat before you opened them? And it helps set the seam, kind of flatten those stitches down into the fibers so that when I go to do the bend on this to open it up, warm fibers also have a little bit, will create a memory to it. So as I open that up, pressing the seam allowance toward the darker fabric, it makes it open a little bit easier than when the fibers are cold. So I'm going to open up this last one and we'll give them all a quick press. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just press one. I'll leave it there because now the iron surface is hot. And I'm going to go in and just add my second one. And then my third, so that it kind of, the heat from the pressing surface kind of helps work the next one along. So I just stack them all up and then I have the 3 half-square triangles ready to go. But remember, step 4, under the block, creating block units, you have to trim. Do not forget that. I put it in bold print for a reason. You have to trim them to 4.5. Like I said, they're oversized. So whether you use a 4.5-inch ruler, which I just happen to have, don't ask, I have so many rulers, or a 6.5, which is a really common one, or if you're using some kind of a trimmer tool, lock, the Tucker trimmer, whatever it takes to get this to 4.5. So if you have one of those trimming tools, this eliminates some of the lines. The Tucker trimmer does. It's a little bit more basic. It doesn't have all the lines of a traditional, say, 6.5 or 4.5-inch ruler. It makes it a little bit easier to trim, so you don't have to fight with all the different lines. But each of these rulers has the diagonal for the 45. So I'm going to lay the 45. I'm using the corner in the upper right-hand corner. It has a half of a circle there. That means that using this corner, everything ends on the 1/2 inch. If I have it oriented this way, it has a full circle, which means that everything oriented into this corner would finish on the even inch. But I need 4.5. So we're moving it around to the 4.5. I'm going to lay that diagonal right down the center of my 2 fabrics. And I'm centering this on. I have just a little bit on each side to trim. So one side, and then trim the second side. And I will have perfect 4.5-inch half-square triangle units to put into my block. Okay, so make sure you do that to all 3 of them so you have those trimmed down nice and neat. Okay, then we have the next portion. It talks about using our 2.5-inch squares. So we have 2.5-inch squares from both fabrics, and we have the 4.5s. Now, the thing here is that the littles of one fabric are going with the opposite fabric, and the littles from this fabric are going with this. So we're going to create unit A and unit B. It doesn't matter which combination, light or dark, because your values might actually be similar. It's just their combination of two fabrics. One is going to be considered A, one is going to be considered B. So they are all made exactly the same way, but this is what we need to do. You need to mark a diagonal across each of the squares. I'm marking on a dark fabric, and I am using a ceramic pencil so that it makes a nice, neat diagonal line across my block that can be easily seen. Dark fabrics are hard to find marking tools for. So that was the reason why I chose this one to demo on, because I wanted you to see what a ceramic pencil would leave that nice, crisp line across the block. Bridget says, good morning from France. It's wonderful you're here. Someone, I missed the name, somebody from Norway, and they had rain and thunderstorms. Oh, you guys are having it. Why can't we have some rain? We have hardly had any rain in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Kimberly says, hello from Waterford, Texas. New to quilting, enjoying your presentation. Thanks. We really love, do I use steam when I press? I tend not to, because I know that when I use steam, I will distort my blocks. Some people love to use steam. You just have to be very careful. I also live in an area where we have very hard water. And for me to remember to buy distilled water to put into my iron just wasn't going to happen, because I started quilting when I still was running after 4 children. All of my kids are now grown, almost all married. But during those years, I would put just regular tap water in my iron. And of course, that killed my iron because it would begin to rust out and build up lime on the inside of my iron. So I've kind of just resolved the fact that if I want to add moisture, I do it with the spritz bottle instead of putting water in my iron, because then my iron lives longer. Otherwise, I was killing irons about every 6 months or so, because always sitting at the sewing machine, always have the iron on, and that's bad news for my iron. So I do not use steam very often. I do use a mist bottle if I've got a really heavy seam or an extremely wrinkled fabric that needs to relax a bit before I go and cut it. So once in a while, you use the mist bottle, but most of the time I'm using a dry iron just to help my iron live longer. Okay, I've got 2 of these squares now marked with diagonal seams. The diagrams in the pattern on page 4 will really walk you through this. You're going to put one at a time into one corner of your base 4.5-inch block, but you can't put both on right away. So it's one at a time. And let me put my needle in the center position, because we're going to follow the line for this seaming. You don't need to worry about a 1/4-inch seam here. You just follow the drawn line, which makes it very nice. And these are kind of floating stars. We aren't going to worry about outer points of the star at all, because it's going to float within the rest of the fabric. So put on one. And I know it's tempting sometimes to sit down and just put the second one on right away, but don't do that because you need to open this up to create that triangle square into the corner and trim before you put the next one on, or you're going to lock that fabric down and it will be hard to trim. So if you're sitting down to do a bunch of these, put on one square on one corner, take them out of the machine, do the fold back so that you know that it's positioned properly, and then trim the underneath 2 layers. And you can use a rotary cutter, you can use a scissors, whatever you like. Get that one done, then go back to the machine and do the second corner. Now, making sure that that diagonal line is according to what it looks like in the diagram there, because if you lay this on there the wrong direction, you're going to be sewing into the center of your block, and that won't allow it to look like a triangle or a star point when you're done. So the second point We're just going to stitch that one really quick, and then we'll talk about getting everything arranged and where our 1/4 inch seams are. Okay, we've got our second square put in place and a diagonal seam. Nicole is asking, how do you remove the ceramic lines if they're marked on the front? These are for marking on the back side of fabric. Now, these are somewhat erasable, and it does come with an eraser so that you can lighten those lines if you accidentally write on the improper side of your fabric, but it is erasable on the ceramic. So as I just touch that with the eraser, the line lightened up and it's pretty much gone. But make sure that you use this. Usually we're always talking about marking on the back side of fabric when we're doing our piecing. And I'm using batiks today, which is really a cheater because on batiks, the ink is so deeply applied that there really isn't a right or wrong side of the fabric. Sometimes you can notice maybe it's a little clearer on one side than the other, but pretty much the ink penetrates through the base fabric and you really cannot tell right and wrong side. Okay, so I've got my second square diagonal seam down there. I've finger pressed it out so that I can go back and trim off that underneath piece. And then we're going to take it over to the iron and give it a nice quick press. And you're going to make 2 that look like this in the Unit A or Block A combination. So you're going to make 2 that look like this, and then you're going to make 2 in the opposite combination with the dark as your base, and you're going to have triangles on this. So you're going to have 2 of these and 2 of these. Now, I'm going to switch over to a different fabric grouping here just because I was working with fat quarters. I don't have spare pieces. So now that you have, and I have one of these, it's not trimmed, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about it. We have the assembly. Now this is where you got to kind of make sure that you get everything oriented properly. So triangle squares, 1, 2, 3. They're going to make a diagonal across your block. All of one color is going one direction, all the other color going the opposite direction. So if you got those oriented, that kind of helps you a little bit. Then where you've made your 2 different color combinations of unit A's and B's, they're kind of like mirror imaged of each other, kind of coordinated twins, we'll call them. Okay, so where the purple is, you want that to be the purple or the same fabric. Okay, so your pieces like this, same fabric. So that means, and then this coordinate, the print, that means I want the print pieces to be here as the background on this half. And look, I almost laid it down like that. I would be making a completely different block because I need my star points toward the center. So orient your star points toward the center. Now I only have 2 places left to fill. And that is the background that matches here and the background that matches here. Now, looking that you have all the same fabric on these 2 edges and all the same fabric out here in the exterior. That gives you that split star effect. And at this point, then all you're doing is a basic 9-patch construction. So you're joining into rows. If you're a horizontal row person or vertical, depends on your orientation, which it won't matter if you do vertical or horizontal rows, but join into rows and then join those rows together. Well, let's see, do we have any other questions? Nope. Okay, we are going to do a little bit of joining pieces here just because I want to point out the direction to get seams to match up nicely. So let's do this. I'm going to do my 9-patch. I'm going to do that booking method where I chain them together because it's nice to have them oriented and ready to go and not have to move them out of place when it comes to the construction. Best 1/4 inch seaming here. Now, I have a feeling that as you're watching this, you're thinking, oh, I would love to do this in this genre of fabric. So pop in and let us know what kind of style or flavor you would make this split star into. This is one of those, like I said, an evergreen pattern that you could use in just about any color combination, even florals. Remember, stripes and plaids are always fun to put into projects. Okay, I'm gonna get this last piece here, and then we'll talk about that pressing so that you have your abutted seams when you go to join pieces together. Oops, I need to cut my thread first. There we go. Okay. I love to have this clothesline effect because it keeps me from getting things twisted out of place. So then I can just lay it back down and be ready to join on that last column. So I'll be joining these on to the pieces. So 1, 2, 3. But as we get into this, pressing of the seam allowances if you want to make a notation on your pattern, on this one, I press seams toward the outer edge in the top row, toward the center. And you can see how this naturally kind of wants to go that direction because nobody wants to bend back against that intersection of those points there. So we're going to go here. So it's going to go toward the center row, toward the center, bottom row toward the outer edge. So top and bottom are going the same direction to the outer edge. And then that means that when you once you get your third piece on and you're doing the rows together, you would have abutted seams here. So you'll have a perfect little join of your pieces in what basically is a 9-patch block, but the split star. Okay, let's take the quilt back out here. So keeping organized, keeping light color pieces together until you're ready to start coordinating which pieces you want to put together. When I was working on this, I got a ways into I was taking, okay, I want to put this red with this blue, and I want to put this green with this blue. And then I realized I didn't want to get to the very end of the process and maybe have 2 of the different reds or 2 of the different blues to put together. It didn't give me as much contrast as I wanted. So when you start getting into the process, you may want to go down the row a ways and plan out what 2 fabrics are going to go together before you start piecing them. So if you are a planned, scrappy kind of quilter like I am, you may go and marry up 2 fabrics in each of them to make sure that you get the contrast that you want. If you have a slight contrast, that's okay too. But that is the split stars. Let's see if we have a couple other questions. Vivian, red, white, and blue for Quilt of Valor. That would be great. You might need to add a few more fabrics because if it's going to be an official Quilt of Valor, it has to meet the minimum size requirement, but that would just mean adding extra fat quarters. So easy enough to do. But remember, 2 by 2. So if you got, if you're going to try and figure out maybe additional, or you could put on a really fabulous border. So, or a couple of borders. Victoria says, where can I get the ceramic pencils? The ceramic pencils, there are quite a few different companies. Probably your local quilt shop will carry them. Sewline is one of the biggest producers of it. Fons and Porter has produced one. There may be, trying to think if there's another company out there that I've seen with them, but you can get them. You could order through Amazon. You can go, but first check out your local quilt shop because we really want to keep those local shops, are out there for us to be able to touch fabric and see new tools. So if you have a local quilt shop in your area, go ask them for that ceramic mechanical pencil. Sewline is one of the brands, and Fons and Porter is another one. And you will, another tool that I didn't want to like, but once I tried it, it was a winner. So I usually I don't like to talk about products unless I really like them. These have leads that are available in green, gray, white. I think there's pink, but I tend to keep away from pink just because anything with red, any shade of red can be a problem. And I think also yellow color lead. But the nice part is that they are very visible. The green is really visible on dark fabrics, except on maybe a green fabric that's kind of a neutral green. But they work great on dark fabrics. So ceramic pencil. Esther says orange and cream. Ooh, that sounds like a really citrus kind of color combination. I would love to see that one created. Wonderful. So split stars, download for your next project and have fun creating a floating star that has a lot of punch. Thanks for joining me today.